Jurassic World Dominion is finally out after 4-year wait and is roaring to the box office, totaling $389 million globally on its opening weekend. And although the movie does carry its flaws, the critics have torn it to shreds quicker than a raptor that attacks from the sides. And the general audience seem to be loving it, thus the big box office numbers and the high audience on Rotten Tomatoes. I myself, having seen it twice, I must admit the first time I walked out of the theatre, I felt disappointed and bemused at some of the creative decisions made. And I'm a big fan of the two previous World movies, but on second viewing, knowing what I was coming into, it helped my experience a lot more and I was able to enjoy the movie a lot more. Today I'm just going to be talking a bit about my experiences, my thoughts, what Dominion did well and what I think they could have done better as well. A bit of a review on everything, and just voice a little bit of what I think on the movie. For me, bringing back the original trio was a great idea and concept, and I do feel for a lot of their performance they were very good, but I do feel at times they went a bit too heavy into the comedic relief area. And there was a few scenes where it definitely seemed like watching old people fumble around for a cheap laugh, and the whole dynamic between Grant and Sattler was a bit too on the nose and again leaned too far into the comedic side, and I wasn't a fan of them playing dress up in disguise to get the DNA, as I think it might have been a bit smarter to get Ramsey to get in and get the DNA, as he was already in there at the sanctuary and he probably had better access as well, and knew, and probably by that time he was there, he probably would have known how to sort of get in and get out without being detected all that much, which I think would have been probably a better route to go through rather than sort of getting Grant Sattler to play dress up in disguise. But yeah, and speaking of Grant, his character seemed probably the most off-brand amongst the trio to return, and almost pretty much as a comic relief character as compared to his sort of soft-spoken and more matter-of-fact portrayal in Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park 3. But I will admit there was moments where I felt that they were very true to character, and especially with Malcolm's interaction with Dodgson. And then one of the newer characters, Kayla Watts, was pretty enjoyable for the most part, and I felt she lent into a bit of that sort of cliche sort of role of the hard-nosed but soft on the inside type, but she kind of did it in a way that it really worked well, and I think because it's the first time we've sort of seen her as well, it kind of works, as we have no other point of reference for her other than just me seeing her in this movie, so it kind of gives her that leeway to sort of lean into that character a bit more. But yeah, probably the only scene that took me out of it a little bit was the sort of comedic scream she does as she's running away from the Pyroraptor, and then she sort of tases the Pyroraptor out of spite. Again, it was sort of too far into the direction of lighthearted comedy, and it kind of made that interaction with the Pyroraptor into a bit of a joke, and then when you lean into the comedic side so heavily, it kind of takes away from the stakes and the tensions, and it goes very light and easy. But in this movie they brought back a character from the very first Jurassic Park that didn't have a great role, which was in the first movie, which was Dodgson, and now he's the head of Biosyn, which interestingly enough they didn't really mention any of his sort of connection throughout the movie, but other than like a sort of few indicators with like a little Barbasol can and stuff like that. But the original characters never found out that he was part of, or he was responsible for the takedown of the original Jurassic Park, which I thought was an interesting sort of way to sort of handle that, especially considering that they were trying to go full circle in the whole sort of story as well. So, but that's something I was expecting, but they decided to go a different route. But initially, on my second viewing, I sort of eased up a lot and really enjoyed his character. especially as he tries to represent himself as somebody trustworthy, but there's just something a little bit off about him, and that your gut just tells you that this guy is a bit of a red flag. And I think that's really good acting on the actor's part, to be able to sort of present that really sort of somebody who acts nice on the surface, but is a bit weird and there's something a bit off about him. And I think that's great testament to the actor to be able to sort of portray that. And I also enjoyed a couple of sort of moments that really echoed into his ruthlessness that they show in the books, where he stops Grant Sattler's Hyperloop in the amber mines, and he kind of just tells them that there's no security or anything like that going out there, or it's sort of implied that he'll handle it, but he's not really going to handle it. He's just left them out there to die or get eaten by dinosaurs, as far as he cares. I thought that was a real good echo into his sort of character that was in the books. Yeah, I just wish that they showed more of how Bison became how they were, and how they got to that point in power. Maybe in sort of like a flashback montage that starts off the movie. Would have been perfect, especially as the wider audience that's not as familiar with sort of all the Jurassic stuff. Would have been good to show them a lot more of who he was, and remind them of how he was the big pillar in terms of bringing down Jurassic Park, and it would have made that connection even deeper between the first movie and this one, bringing all 6 movies into that perfect sort of loop. But surprisingly, for me, the puppets and practical effects didn't really work that well. I think a lot of them needed that sort of CGI wash over the top to bring them to life. For me, I don't want to notice if it's a practical effect or CGI. I just want to see a photoreal creature on the screen. These puppets, I felt flat, and they lacked a lot in texture, character, and mostly a lot of the fluidity in movement as well. They felt a bit more rigid and very slow as well in their movements, compared to what's been shown before, and compared to a lot more animals. It felt a bit more kind of like those animatronics you see in theme parks. They sort of have that really sort of rigid movement, and they only move as much as they sort of need to, rather than sort of ambient movements that you notice subconsciously, and it really brings the character to life. And I think this was probably a direct result of a vocal minority from Fallen Kingdom, where the effects, in my opinion, looked really amazing, and 90% of the shots in the movie looked genuinely photoreal to the screen. And I actually think that this kind of hipster mentality is taking filmmaking backwards, as it's not allowing the best story to be told, but rather feel a quota to make a few happy, in terms of showing off like that's a puppet, and they're like, yes, we're using practical effects, but it never really should ever be noticeable that if it's a practical effect or a CGI effect, it should just be an animal. And sometimes I feel some people just complain that it's CGI because they know it's CGI, not because it doesn't look photoreal, and that's where it's sort of taking back filmmaking backwards a lot. And I've noticed that over a lot of these movies as well, and in this one it's become sort of like a culmination of those critics. But I'll definitely go in more depth in another video about this sort of VFX stuff, and what I think of it as well. But the animatronic blend between the CGI for the Giganotosaurus looked and worked really well, I think. And also the CGI for the most part was pretty good, barring a few janky scenes, especially early on in the news segment, with the Stigi in front of the train, and also when they first showed Blue looking directly at the camera behind the trees. That really sort of looked very... It didn't look like it was composited all that well. But for the most part, everything else looked pretty good. Yeah, and then the ending battle for me was a little bit underwhelming for two reasons. One was when Alan says this isn't about us, it sort of failed to have as much impact as it should have done, as the rivalry between the Giga and the Rex wasn't built up as much throughout the movie as I would have personally wanted, especially in the initial interaction when the Rex finds the deer. It would have been a better setup if that little interaction was a lot more brutal and a little bit longer before they sort of part ways and call it a stalemate. And then possibly when they're calling the dinosaurs back into their sort of Biosyn main area, I think that would have been an ideal time to sort of set up the two sort of biting or sort of roaring at each other until finally the two of them have had enough of each other and they sort of start squaring off and that just so happens to be the same time as when the character are running through that area to get to the helicopter, and then if Alan said that line then, I think it would have had a lot more impact. And I know there's the prologue as well that's sort of supposed to set up all this stuff, but I think because that's not these two specific animals, that it doesn't have as much impact as it would have done if they showed a few more scenes between these two specific animals as well. And I didn't mind the Thero being a part of that fight as well. I guess they wanted it because of like a new sort of really unique animal. It probably would have worked better if it was more of like a three-way battle between the two rather than like sort of like a 2v1 with the Giga against the Giga. But having said that, the battle was action-packed and quite thrilling and pretty full-on as well, and also had great visual effects, but it just required sort of a bit of a better setup for a more sort of satisfying payoff. Overall, the positives for me would be the Malta sequence. I quite enjoyed the Bond-style action setup mixed in with dinosaurs. I would have toned back on the sort of cliche villains, especially that lady in the white dress. I forget her name, but like, yeah, she was very super cliche, sort of like drug deal type, dropping off the load kind of thing. And probably I would have preferred if they grounded it a little bit more, but like the whole sequence as a whole was quite thrilling, and a great sort of experience as well, especially in theaters as well. That kind of sequence just works great as well because it's so full on and there's a lot going on. And another thing I found positive was the Owen, Claire and Maisie dynamic. I thought they worked really well in this movie, and along with Blue and Owen's relationship portrayal in this movie I thought was great. And I really liked the way Blue was very protective of her child, even with people that Owen knew. She was quite sort of aggressive. And when her baby got stolen, I enjoyed the fact that she kind of slashed at Owen, showing a bit sort of like even she's got her limits, even with Owen as well. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that. And there was also some great moments between the whole cast coming together. I thought they kind of had good chemistry, and getting the original cast back did feel great to watch, despite some cringy moments and issues that I stated before. They were fun to watch on the big screen, and especially Malcolm's verbal tussle with Dodgson. I really did enjoy that sort of interaction between Dodgson and him, trying to sort of one-up each other and get their point across, but in a sort of passive-aggressive but sort of civil way. I thought both of them did that really well. And the CGI for the most part was pretty good, barring a couple of sort of janky things. And I also liked the bison sanctuary concept, along with the mention of sawn animals being present. Some of you may have missed the brief cameo of the Rex pair from The Lost World at the very end. I know a few people complained about this, but I did feel the pacing was pretty good, because I didn't ever feel like it was a 2.5 hour movie, even on multiple viewings. But I would sort of happily trade that to flesh out a few more sort of plot points, so that they had more impact, and cutting more of the sort of cringy scenes or doing them entirely differently. But yeah, overall, the basis / concept of the plot seemed intriguing and interesting to me, taking the ecological issues brought upon the consequences of genetic tampering with the Locust plotline. Was right up the Crichton alley, but never really fleshed out enough to feel like an actual threat. And I feel like the setup from Fallen Kingdom, with dinosaurs living amongst humans, was never really touched upon during the movie, so in that regards it didn't really feel like an overall satisfying conclusion. But I will say, upon multiple viewings, if you can sort of get past the gripes with the story and some of the cringe moments of dialogue, and taking it for what it is, which in my opinion is more of like an action adventure / light comedy, then it's a super fun ride, and then you won't really feel the 2.5 hours. And overall, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 for me personally, probably taking off points for the story and the plot, and sort of the off-putting sort of character beats, cringy sort of dialogue moments, and underwhelming practical effects kind of take those points off of me. But I definitely recommend it for the pure entertainment value, providing what I think is a really fun ride with big action sequences and great sound design and some good laughs, perfect for watching it in the theater, and being fully in that sort of environment. I think it's a great experience if you sort of take that in mind. But so that's my thoughts on Jurassic World Dominion. Let me know what yours are, comments down below, and if you like what we do, please like and subscribe. Until next time, we'll catch you later. Thank you.